Hi there. This is Senor Hook speaking, and for now I wish to remain anonymous, but pretty much what I want to do is I want to be able to document my journey to fire. And I'm going to tell you afterwards more of my story on why I want to pursue fire. And for those of you who are just starting out, fire is financial independence, retiring early. So, yeah, pretty much how I am right now is next week I begin for the first time my full-time job. It'll be the first time I'm working 40 hours a week. And what I'm going to be doing during this time is I'm going to be investing an enormous amount. I'm going to be investing about 50 to 80% of my wages into a low-cost index fund, and any leftover money that I get, I'm going to pursue house hacking. In other words, I'll be moving in with a friend. We're going to be purchasing a house using an FHA loan and with a low money down payment, and in hopes that we shall find a cash flowing property in which our tenants' rent will be able to pay for utilities and the mortgage payment, etc. So we will be essentially living for free. So, yeah, pretty much all the money that I plan on making through this full-time job is going to be strictly used for passive income. So, I want to be able to keep my composure here as I talk to you about my story and why I'm so determined to become financially independent so soon. And I think it all really started about 5-6 years ago. Excuse me. However, when I was about 18 or 19, when I was finally deciding what my major was going to be at the university that I was attending. And I went to a state school. In high school, I had no ambitions for my future, really. I just kind of felt like I just was going to do the necessary labor through my 9-to-5 job. And I was really hoping that somehow maybe I would become popular over the internet because I loved, gaming and things like that, and talking through and doing voiceovers and things like that. So I was really hoping that would take off before I had to sit down a 9-to-5 job. And so it wasn't really a good plan. I was 18, I was 19, and I remember walking through the hallway with one of my professors, and they asked me, "Well, Andrew, my name is Andrew. So, Andrew, what do you want to study?" And I was undeclared at the moment, and this was the time when I would be making my decision. And I said, well, maybe Spanish. I'd like to teach, I said. And then I kept correcting myself, because in my head at the same time, I was thinking, I can't say I guess. This is my future. This is what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. How can I just say something like I guess for something like this? And so they said, okay, so would you like to pursue Spanish education? And I said, sure. And then I corrected myself again. I said, yes, Spanish education. And in hindsight, that was 100% more of a sure as opposed to a yes, because at that time I just said yes. All I knew at that time was that I liked Spanish, and I knew kind of deep down I wanted to be an interpreter, but even deeper down I kind of knew that I really didn't really have the advantage against people who spoke Spanish as a first language and who grew up bilingually, even if I knew Spanish on a grammatical level. A job like an interpreter, that doesn't really matter. So my plan, I suppose, was just to be a teacher. And I said, sure, yeah, that's fine. And so I, bit my teeth, tooth and nail, and took my classes. And I graduated in 4 years. And I got my certification. Now, before I got my certification, I did a little something that everybody knows called student teaching. And this was the absolute worst experience of my life. And it wasn't so much of a thing where it was because of the job itself. It was mainly because the woman that I was working with was disparaging. She would chastise me at any given moment. She would ridicule my teaching skills. She would hammer me down with every single mistake that she could possibly find. And this is me years later, really only 2 years later, but this is me 2 years later with a little more experience under my belt. I'm no longer this brand new teacher. And I knew back then it was bad, but it was, my student teaching experience was 16 weeks. And she only showed signs of being this maniacal manipulator about 4 months in, and it started out kind of bad. About 4 months in, it started out getting pretty bad, and then I was like, okay, this isn't terrible. I'll just put up with it for another 2 to 4 months. That's okay, because you can pretty much deal with anything for a month or two. And mainly because I didn't want to have to redo the other 4 months that I had accomplished. So, or the other 2 months, sorry. So I stuck with it. I kept doing it, and it got worse and worse. And as vulnerable as this makes me feel every single day, I would just come home and in absolute tears, and I would be just counting down to the minute when until when I was going to be done with student teaching. And it was an awful experience. I felt completely trapped. I was like, oh my gosh, this, even if I knew that it was mainly because of the teacher that I was working with, it was the whole environment. I didn't want to be a teacher after that. I didn't want to deal with paperwork in that way anymore because of the way I was pretty much just traumatized. And the hours she would talk my ear off for hours on end after my classes were finished. We would sit down. I'd be all done at around at 2:15, and she would pretty much just be talking my ear off until 5 o'clock. She would be giving me all this information, and expecting me to remember everything. And then the next day, if I missed a tiny detail, she would chastise me, saying, "What did we talk about?" As if she was a drill sergeant, or worse than that, because it was all things that were psychologically damaging for me. And then what happened was I had a supervisor who would be coming in to my lessons, and they would watch me teach. So this happened 3 times. It's typical. That was average for all the student teachers that were teaching at that time. And so the third lesson, I received no help from my cooperating teacher. At that point, I think she had given up on me, which it was really bizarre. And I mean, I am the most critical critique of myself, and I can just tell you right now that it wasn't me. I didn't do anything wrong. Or of course I did some things wrong, but the things that I did wrong were so tiny compared to the backlash that I got from her. It was disgusting, really. So anyway, I had my third, I don't know really how you call it, but she was watching my lesson, and I just kind of wung it. I just did what I was doing before because my teacher had shot down all of my ideas before, so I pretty much gave the worst lesson you could possibly give in front of a supervisor. Imagine you just pretty much teaching, you hand a worksheet out, they read a few things, they write a few things on the board. It was very teacher-centered. It wasn't student-centered at all. And it was just, it wasn't what they were looking for. So, and I knew it too, but everything had been shot down. I was absolutely defeated, and I'm sure that translated too as a teacher in front of those kids. I was just like this, I just imagined myself being this turtle inside of a shell in front of 18 students. It was, and I was just an emotional wreck. So a few days later, I had gotten a message from one of my co-teachers. Now, this teacher, she was also another student teacher, and we were taking the same class at the same university. So we're student teaching through the same program, but we were in a different school, but we just had the same supervisor. So what she had said to me was, she said, "Hey, I got a message from my supervisor saying that we have a meeting, and they won't tell me what the meeting is about." All they said was that it was about her student teaching performance, and she was freaking out, and we were freaking out for her too, because we had been through the same program for 4 years, well, probably about 2 years, and we didn't know if she was going to fail. We had no idea what was going to happen. And if you're wondering how this ties into my experience, you'll see why. And then, so afterwards, about a week later, she said, "I sat down with the supervisors at the university, and they gave me 3 options. They said, you can either graduate with your Spanish Bachelor's of Arts. In other words, you wouldn't have your teaching certificate. You would just be a Spanish major. So all those classes that she had paid for to get her certification in would have been down the drain. So that was the first option. The second option is to do an extension in student teaching. And the third option would be to repeat the entire process that fall. So now we were all shocked. Of course, we had no idea. But she was telling me how they weren't getting along with her cooperating teacher and how she really disliked it a lot. So, and she ended up graduating just with her Bachelor's of Arts, and then I think the next year she was able to do something and be able to get her certification, but I didn't know that at that time. So all we knew was that she got those 3 options, and she just in an emotional wreck. She just said, I'm done, guys. I'm just going to graduate with my Spanish Bachelor's of Arts and just call it a day, call it a year. So now back to me. As you can imagine where this is going, I get an email a few days later saying, "Hi, Andrew. We would like to have a meeting with you about your student teaching experience." And I just remembered that the weekend going into that was just the absolute worst. It was the worst few days possible. I've never experienced something so emotionally draining, just constant draining, cognitive draining, just weighing on my brain, saying like, "Oh my God, I've got three options. I jumped to the conclusion that I have three options, and they wouldn't tell me, of course, at the time. Once they contacted me, it's a whole corporate thing. They won't tell me exactly why they want to have the meeting with me. But yeah, so it was about I think it was a weekend. I just remember everything that I did that weekend. I couldn't sleep. I woke up and it was like I would have like almost like these night terrors. Like I would, it's like you wake up and just think like, oh my God, no, I'm me. It's so sad to think about it, but that's how it felt like waking up in the morning. And I remember it was my grandparents' anniversary, and I remember actually going to the bathroom during their anniversary dinner and just crying. Like I could not keep my composure, because now this was me. I had literally a countdown down to the minute how many days I had left. My mom had written it on the calendar how many weeks I had left. We were crossing out the days, and it was just absolutely heart draining. And then so I had the meeting, and I was just as blunt as possible with my supervisors. And I said that what I was going through was absolute hell, and that I was being pretty much emotionally just being attacked by this woman, completely manipulated. And I tried to give as many examples as I could as to what was happening and how she was treating me. And they finally said, do you feel like you're ready to become a teacher? And I said, yes. I knew what they wanted to hear. So I said, yes, absolutely. It was just this process that I was going through. It was just absolutely terrible. And they told me, okay, well, we really don't want you to go through that, to continue in that environment anymore. So we're going to let you graduate with your certification. And it was just, oh my gosh, it was so relieving. And then the next day, oh my gosh, imagine it was Cinco de Mayo, and so I had decorated the entire classroom with banners hanging from the ceiling, and there was confetti things. There was like little flags. There were little decorations all over the classroom. I brought in Pringles. Of course, it was all confirmed, and it was accepted to bring in cookies and snacks to the school. So there was nothing bad there. But I brought in Pringles. I brought in cookies, chocolate chip cookies. And my cooperating teacher walked in that day, took a look around at the classroom, and said absolutely nothing to me. Like, just completely ignored me, ignored everything I did, and just, I would say hi to her. I would always say hi to her first. But even then, she would just be like, hi. Hey. And it was just so, I don't know. It's just really crazy to me thinking back on that, how little I meant to her and how poorly that woman treated me. But yeah, that day went, well, it went okay. She said that she would bring in the movie, but she forgot to bring in the movie. So I had a plan B, and then she was disparaging me about my plan B, saying, you should have had a plan B, even though that was my plan B. Little did she know. But you can't talk back to her because you're always wrong. It's that kind of thing. Like, you're always wrong, no matter what. So, okay. Now, fast forward. After that experience, I really, really did not want to be... I didn't want to jump into a public school right away. I wasn't ready mentally, and yeah, that was it. I did not want to start working in a public school. So I went back to school and I got my master's, and I had a lot of money saved up just from birthdays and stuff that I never used. So I was able to pay in cash for my master's, which was good. And so I was debt free because my grandparents had paid for my undergraduate as well, and I was very thankful for that. And so I was all finished. While I was working on my master's, I was tutoring as a graduate writer, as a graduate tutor, as well as a bilingual tutor, and I also tutored students in Spanish. So, and then when I was done with that, I worked at the university as a part-time professor. So I was able, because you're able to teach in my state in a university if you have an MS part-time. So, and it was a really nice experience. I absolutely love the staff there, and I made a really good wage for being part time. It was, well, I won't talk about the numbers, but it wasn't a lot less money than I would be making as a full time teacher. Say, give or take, maybe 10 or 15 grand a year. And the amount of time that I put into it, it was a really good part-time job. I loved it. But, so now I'm at where I am, today, more or less. I lost that job because of COVID-19 indirectly. And, so the beginning of this year, while I was still working in this part-time job at the university, I got into finance because pretty much I had $10,000 in my bank account. You know, I was living at home. I still am living at home, my parents' house, and I had no idea what to do with it. And I was kind of Googling around some stuff, and my mom's friend suggested a book to me, and it was called J.L. Collins, that was the author, J.L. Collins, A Simple Path to Wealth. And in that book, they pretty much outlined the basics for index funding, diversifying into bonds, and long-term index fund growth investing. So, and when I started learning about that and how people were on these missions to retire as fast as possible by furiously investing into index funds. Some people do mutual funds, but it's just especially in index funds because there's your commission fees aren't compounded over time. When I was learning about these stories and how these people are gaining their financial freedom, I was absolutely hooked. So from that book, I read about real estate investing. I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I was just absolutely hooked on finances in general, and really just the power of passive income. Because, I mean, working, you can only get so far ahead. There's only so many hours in a day for a W-2 job, and there's nothing really worth buying apart than something that's going to generate you more income, in my opinion. I mean, you know, of course, there are nice things you can do with your money, but honestly, financial freedom is just the most valuable thing, in my opinion, you can ever do with your money. And of course, giving it away to people. I've really had a good time. Just these past few weeks, just giving back to my parents for letting me live in their home for a while now, into my 20s. So now, speaking of my parents, they were also big motivators for me to get into this financial stuff, because my grandparents own a business, and they're pretty much running it into the ground at the moment. And my father has been working in that business for 40 years. And he has no pension. He has no retirement fund. And they are deeply, deeply in debt. So my motivation is to not end up like my parents, because it's frightening listening to them. my parents have had panic attacks, and I love my parents so much, and I don't want to ever live like that. I don't want my family to ever live like that. And I also don't want them to live like that when they're older. Hopefully when I'm an adult, I'm able to help them, because it seems like they're definitely going to need that help. So once I got hooked on all this financial business, just like a light switch flicked on in my head. And I just said, I have a reason now to make money. Before, I was just making money because it was what people do. I was never taught any financial literacy. But now that I've realized the power of passive income and the power of a dollar and how that dollar can work for you, I decided, you know what, I'm going to utilize my certification as much as I can. So I'm picking up a full-time teaching job, finally, for the first time. Starting, I'm going to see the school for the first time in 2 days. So yeah, I'm totally on board. I know what I'm doing now. I have a clear goal in my head, and I really want to be able to record this and document my experiences, because it's important for me to not lose track, pretty much. It's important for me because I know I'm going to get swallowed in to being a teacher, pretty much, because obviously teaching is a lot of work. There's a lot of homework. You bring you bring your job with you when you're a teacher. You grade papers, etc. But I'm just so excited to be able to start investing as much as I can with my wages, and I really hope to be able to document this process as much as possible, so that people can see that they can do this too. This is by no means a job that is making a ton of money. It's fairly average. It's $50K a year, and I will probably end up doing something over the summer. Hopefully I will stay determined. Determined as I am now. Hopefully I'm not beat by that time. And right now I've been tutoring while things are still in the process of being social distanced. So I'm tutoring overseas, and I've made about $1,000 doing that over this month. So I want people to realize that I'm going to be documenting the process. I'm going to be talking with you guys as much as I can, and sharing with you maybe some of my goals along the way, and some of the twists and turns that I run into during this process. And so this is my story. I shared a lot, just about, I'm at like 28 minutes now, about my teaching experience, my teaching horrors during my student teaching, and some of the difficulties that my parents have had. So I'm happy to get all on the table, so sorry. Yeah, I'm like getting choked up a little bit. All right, so thank you so much for watching this, and have an awesome day.